Hey, welcome back to Business 163, Personal Finance, and welcome to Module number 2. Module number 2, as you can see, is entitled Behavioral Finance, and this is our very first lecture in this module. What is behavioral finance? And so, as you can see from the title slide, right, as we get started, we're going to try to answer the question, what is behavioral finance, and why does this matter to us? So you can see here, what is behavioral finance? Behavioral finance is the study of the reason why we don't always make money decisions as rational, objective decision makers. Why is it that sometimes, perhaps many times, we make decisions about money, about spending, about saving, about what we buy and what we don't buy, for reasons other than strictly emotionless, very rational, sort of reasoned decisions? And you can see these two gentlemen here, the images I've given you. These are Richard Thaler and Daniel Kahneman. They started really sort of the fathers of this line of study in economics. They ended up winning the Nobel Prize in economics for publishing in this field. And you can see here the quote, conventional economics, in fact, economics sort of up to the point when Thaler and Kahneman started publishing and studying, conventional economics assumes people are highly rational and unemotional, that they can calculate like a computer and have no self-control problems. Now, of course, even as I'm reading that, you realize, well, that ain't me, and I'm going to guess that's probably not you, at least not all of the time, right? As we return to the slide, you can see the last bullet point. But of course, that's not the case, and that's one big set of reasons why we don't always make the wisest decision about our money. It's because of this very field of study of behavioral finance. Let's see if we can describe at least a couple of findings of behavioral finance, or at least what the research suggests. Here's an example. Let's presume that I'm going to flip a fair coin. In other words, it's not jury-rigged or fixed in some sort of way. It's just a normal coin that 50% of the time is going to come up heads and the other 50% of the time going to come up tails. Okay, at least statistically speaking. And here's the deal. If it comes up heads, you win $10. But if it comes up tails, you lose $5. So the question is, for those of you listening to this video, will you play? How many of you in this class will play this game? And quite frankly, what we are demonstrating here is that more than half of you will choose not to play this game, not because you don't want to win $10, but because you really, really don't want to lose $5. In fact, the chance of losing $5 is such a negative incentive for you, more than 2.25 times more, you will avoid this game because you don't believe the incentive to win will overcome your aversion to losing. Generally speaking, human beings really dislike, we hate losing far more than we love winning. This is an example of behavioral economics. It's not rational. It's not objective, especially given the fact that, at least statistically speaking, heads and tails, you have a 50-50 chance. But we prefer to keep what we have and not lose, more so than we prefer the chances or the opportunity to win. This is just an example of the research. Let's give you another example. Hey, I'm not quite sure how many of you have actually, in some time in your life, gone gambling in a casino, whether it's in Reno or Vegas or some of the local casinos here in California, but has anyone ever lost $200 or more gambling? And the question is, if you've ever had the occasion to gamble and walked out of that casino losing, more than $200, here's the question: why didn't we stop after we lost $10? Why do we keep going, right? So imagine this scenario. I'm playing cards at a casino in Las Vegas. Perhaps I'm playing blackjack or a similar card game. And I've won the last 7 hands in a row. This clearly means I'm on a hot streak, right? Well, the whole belief that we have as human beings that this hot streak, that any kind of hot streak is going to continue, that flies in the face of conflicting evidence, right? And this not just in gambling with cards, but in all sorts of things. We think of winners having a winning streak. But rationally speaking, we understand the hot streak doesn't rationally exist. It's just random chance and luck, especially in these kinds of situations. This is also our tendency to believe in hot streaks, which makes its way, for instance, famously into the old video game. Some of you may have played it, NBA 2K, where if a basketball player in the video game goes on a hot streak, right, then the basketball has little flames on it, right, in that video game. Famously, just an illustration of this superstitious belief in the hot streak. This is another example of how we make decisions sometimes in more or less than objective or rational or purely unemotional, computational ways. So here's a question. What about you? Are there some examples in your life of financial choices or habits or decisions that aren't necessarily logical and rational and without emotion? Perhaps you chose to make a particular purchase based upon intuition or how it made you feel, rather than rationally, objectively, did it make sense within your budget, within your income, and within your prior decision about how you're going to spend money? Well, here's my point as we get started with this module in behavioral finance. Perceptions and habits that we have over time result, well, quite frankly, in the consequences that will eventually define our financial situation. Seemingly small things, small little habits, the lack of a long-term financial goal. These can have very significant long-term consequences. Sometimes those consequences are good, sometimes those consequences aren't so good. And understanding that these things are driven by what the researchers would call behavioral finance, as much as it's driven perhaps from time to time by our rational, unemotional, objective decision making, well, this is a very important part as we get started with our discussion on personal finance. So, with that, I would invite you to buckle in, have a mirror sort of, conceptually by your head, that as we go through these video micro lectures on the topic of habits and behavioral finance and the kinds of things that affect our financial decision making, we can sort of look in the mirror, so to speak, and really consider personally and consider transparently and honestly in our own lives, what is it that drives our decision making? I hope that's helpful. We'll see you in the other videos for the balance of Module 2.